Join me in my continued search to find the greatest film of all time. Today I cast my beady eyes on 1976. Welcome to my ranking of films which came out in the year 1976, or at least the ones that I've seen anyway. Now, when I sat down to plan this video, I realised that I'd seen 8 films from this particular year, a number which I wasn't completely satisfied with. I've said all along that I want to have at least 10 films for every one of these yearly rankings. So over the past week, I've been furiously watching more films from 76 that I've always fancied seeing but just never gotten around to. In fact, I've watched 4 more to take our total today up to 12, which I think is a good number. Now, just a reminder that the film which comes top today will go through to the eventual grand final of 100 films, where I will be declaring once and for all what is the greatest film of all time. And the film which comes second today may also end up in that final, numbers permitting, because I want to have exactly 100 for the final. So let's get into it then and find out what is my 12th favourite movie from 1976. When I was in my early 20s, I went through a phase of watching what I would call extreme horror films, you know, stuff that's just way over the top when it comes to gore and violence and disgusting stuff. I guess maybe I thought at the time I was going to the next phase of my horror education, maybe, but I watched about 7 or 8 of these types of movies. Cannibal Holocaust would be another example of one I watched back then. But eventually I thought, you know what, I'm not even enjoying these films. They're just disgusting for disgusting's sake, and I might as well just go back to watching the type of stuff I was watching before. In today's market, I guess an example of an extreme horror film would be The Human Centipede. Now, I've never seen that, but I will never watch it because just the synopsis of it just makes me feel sick just even thinking about it. I've got my limits, I guess. Now, in the case of Island of Death, there's this one really repulsive scene in there. I mean, I'm not going to say what happens. If you're curious, go and look it up on the internet. But this film was just completely over the top for me. I watched it once, like I said, back in that phase that I was going through, but I would never watch it again. And the shame of it is, the story to this film is not bad. It's about this psychopathic couple. We find out later in the film that they're brother and sister. That's not the disgusting part of the film, though. But they go around causing all these deaths, but it's too over the top. I think if they'd have made a serious horror film out of this premise, it could have been quite good. I wouldn't mind seeing a remake of this, but I'll never go back and watch the original version. If you're into these types of movies, fine, but for me, it was too much. Now, I must admit, I feel a little bit guilty about putting a well-respected film like Taxi Driver next to Island of Death on this ranking. But let me be very, very clear, there is a massive gulf in quality today between 11 and 12. Having said that, Taxi Driver was a first-time watch for me last week. I've never really fancied seeing it before. I'm not usually into slow-moving character dramas, the sort of films that usually win Oscars, in other words, and I guess I was interested for the first 10 minutes of this film. I thought I might get into it. And I'd say the turning point was when Travis Bickle, I think his name is, takes his hot date to watch an X-rated porn film at the cinema. I thought to myself, what are you doing? Why would anybody do that? My sympathy for the character just went completely out the window at that point. And then there's a scene not long after that where he goes into that girl's place of work and starts just making a complete tit of himself. And honestly, I felt embarrassed just watching it, and I kind of trundled through the rest of the movie just wanting to get it done, to say I've seen it, really. Not really enjoying it. The final scene's very good, though. I'm not going to spoil it if you've not seen it, but there's a scene that I didn't expect right at the end of this film, which just bumped it up a little bit in my estimations. It's quite good. It's one of those open-ended things where you're not sure if it's a dream sequence or whether it actually happened, but that was quite good, admittedly, but too little too late by that point. It just wasn't my thing at all, and I certainly won't watch this one again. This is a horror film. It's one I only got done watching for the first time last week. I actually went out and bought a Blu-ray for this, even though I'd never seen the film before, because I'd heard more than one YouTuber over the past year describe it as being a very competently well-made, old-school slasher. It mostly takes itself quite seriously. It's got some very believable characters, though, acting in mostly believable ways. I like the costume of the killer. The whole raincoat and mask thing is really cool. Where the film lets itself down a little bit is the ending. I mean, this film has no finale almost. I think the film takes itself a bit too seriously when it comes to the police procedural side of things, instead of just having some good escapist fun towards the end. When the killer gets revealed in this as well, I was a bit like, really? That's the person who's been doing it all? A little bit underwhelming, but I'd certainly give it another watch, maybe in the future. I'll keep it on my shelf for sure, and I might give the audio commentary a spin. I think listening to a bit about how this film was made and what the thought process behind certain creative choices might improve the thing for me a little bit. So here we have another horror film. This is about a psychopathic motel owner who likes to kill lots of the women who come and stay with him, and he keeps a crocodile out back. It's one of those buildings that's sort of raised off the ground a little bit so the crocodile can get under the building as well. I'm not sure if it's meant to take place in Louisiana or Florida. It's been a good sort of 10, 15 years since I saw this now. It used to be called Death Trap in the UK. I used to own a DVD of it when it was called that. And I think it's only quite recently that it's reverted to its proper title. I definitely remember thinking that it was quite sleazy and crap during the first 20 minutes. You know, I thought to myself, oh God, what am I watching here? But it really improves the longer you watch it. There's some really tense moments when the main girl is sort of trapped under the house and she's in the dark, and we can sort of see the outline of the crocodile sort of moving past her quite close by, and it's not quite spotted her yet. And there's a great payoff at the end of this film when the villain gets his comeuppance. It's a moment where you totally go, yes, that is exactly how I wanted to see that guy taken out. I definitely need to rewatch this one, actually. It was directed by Tobe Hooper. He did this about 2 or 3 years after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so as an almost follow-up to that classic film, I think this was a pretty decent effort. This is another film I watched for the first time last week. I think I saw bits of Josie Wales when I was growing up, but this was definitely the first time I've watched the film all the way through. And it took me a while to get into it. The story starts off in the more central parts of America, places like Tennessee and Missouri, where it's considerably more green looking, the scenery, than your normal sandy landscapes that you see in westerns. And I didn't really buy into the story at first. This idea that somebody who doesn't want to join the army will be hunted like a dog all over America. I mean, what if there are 500 guys like that? There wouldn't be the resources to chase them all, surely. So you just have to sort of go with it when it comes to the tale being told. And like I said, it took a while for me to get into it. There was one point where I started looking on my phone, and that's never a good sign when you're watching a film. But there comes a point when Josie Wales gets out to those more western states like Arizona, and we get to see the desert, that things really picked up and the film became good. And Josie starts to pick up all these stragglers and companions for his journey, and starts to form his own little mini community. And the film sort of took on its own distinct personality at that point, and the action started to get a little bit better. And I really enjoyed it. I'd say from probably the 1 hour mark onwards. There's this sweet love story as well between Josie and this girl that he saves from this band of rapists. It was only after the movie, actually, that I looked on Wiki and realised that the actress who plays this role is the woman who Eastwood literally started dating from pretty much this film onwards for about 15 years. So, I mean, they had good chemistry in the film, and I guess that's why, because they fancied each other for real and they ended up dating. So that's kind of cool. But overall, I've seen better westerns and I've seen worse. Assault on Precinct 13 is about a police station which becomes under siege from all these criminal gangs which surround it because they want to get in for reasons I can't remember, because I've not seen the film in a good 15 years or so. I didn't have time to do a rewatch for this one, sadly, before this rankings. So if I had rewatched it, it's possible it could have come a bit higher. Although I didn't like the ending to this, though, from what memories I do have. I remember really enjoying this and thinking that it was a good thrill ride, and then the ending is really abrupt. I was kind of like, oh, okay, we're ending there, okay, fine. So yeah, I definitely need to watch it again. I'd like to do a Carpenter season of reviews at some point, and if I did that, I might actually start with this film because this is probably Carpenter's earliest horror film of any merit. I'm not even sure if he did any before this. I know there's a film called Dark Star, which he brought up before this, but I don't think that's a horror film. I've never seen the Assault on Precinct remake, by the way, though I've heard that's not bad as well. This is the third film in the Dirty Harry franchise. If you've been following my yearly rankings up until now, you'll know that I've already sent Magnum Force through to the final, and Dirty Harry will probably also be in the final. The Enforcer won't be. I do think there is a slight drop off in quality when it comes to the rest of the Dirty Harry films after the first two. In this instance, I think it's the story which is the problem. This tale of Harry going after this militia group is not as captivating as the Scorpio killer film and the one about the corrupt cops. It does all lead to a really fun shootout, though, on Alcatraz, and there's also a very creative foot chase about halfway through the film, and it's still a lot of fun watching Harry Callahan going around San Francisco doing his thing. He gets a female partner this time around. That's quite fun, and there's all the usual quips and stuff. It's still a good Dirty Harry film. It's just not quite as good as those first two. So here we have the last of the new films which I watched specifically for this rankings. One of the great things about doing this series is the fact that it just gives me an excuse, a reason to go back and watch films which I might otherwise have just never gotten around to. In the case of Future World, I'm not sure why I've never watched it until now, because I like space and sci-fi stuff. I really enjoyed the first film, Westworld, when I saw it as a teenager. And I've seen that film several more times since then. So why I've just never gotten onto Future World, I don't know. But this is a really fun film, watching the new characters in this one go and explore this new branch of the theme park established in the first one. There are some really cool sets in the first half of the film. Second half, I think they maybe ran out of money a little bit because after a point it just seems to become the same room with computers with flashing lights and pipes and boilers and things. You know how in the first Westworld there's a moment where the two main characters go out on horseback and we see miles of desert and mountains, and you get an idea as to just how big the park is. There's nothing like that in the second film. There's no moment where the characters get off a fake rocket ship or something and they see like miles and miles of a really impressive Mars landscape. That would have been cool, but I'm guessing they just didn't have the money to do something like that. It's all very small scale, I guess. One of the reasons why I might go back to this film more in the future, though, is the two leads are absolutely fantastic. They've got a great chemistry. The main guy is played by Peter Fonda, who I'd only previously seen in Race with the Devil, which won Best Film in my 1975 rankings. And I forget the name right now of the woman who plays the female lead alongside him, but she was really good. I've never seen her in anything before, but I thought she was absolutely charming. And the two of them together, they have this kind of romance where they start out the film being really antagonistic towards each other, and then slowly throughout the film they warm up to each other. I thought they had a really, really great relationship in this film. I really enjoyed watching them together. So yeah, Future World's really cool, and it gets number 5 on my list today. This is probably the most famous film on this list, this and Taxi Driver, I'd say. In fact, if you did a poll worldwide, I reckon Rocky would probably win most people's 1976 rankings, but I've only got it fourth. I do love the franchise, though. I saw my first Rocky film in the late 80s. I was like 8 or 9 at the time. It was Rocky 2, the first one I saw, and I went to bed on such a high that night. I think it was good that I saw the one where Rocky actually beats Apollo at that age. I'm not sure if I would have understood it so much if I'd seen the one where Rocky loses. Now, the trouble with a franchise like this, when it comes to a rankings like this, is that even though I think the overall series is really good, I'm not sure as individual movies if they're in any way near good enough to win, any of these lists. So I'm going to make a big bold prediction now that even though I love this series, we're not going to see any Rocky films in the grand final further down the line, especially as I probably would say that this first film is the best, and I've only got it fourth for this particular year. There's one scene in this film which I really don't like, which is when Rocky gets Adrian to go in his apartment, and then he doesn't seem to let her leave until she kisses him, and it's a really awkward scene to watch now. I'm not sure a scene like that would get written in a modern day movie. It's hard for me to believe that that was an okay scene in 1976. I would love to ask Sylvester Stallone about it, but honestly, whenever I watch the film, I sort of have to skip past that scene. It's really uncomfortable. But don't get me wrong, this is still an absolutely classic film. I do enjoy it. Any film which gets fourth in this company has done something right. Rocky is awesome. Classic horror film alert, The Omen. Yeah, I really love this film. I watched it for the first time as a teenager and I've seen it several times since. The most recent viewing was only about a year ago, I'd say. It's definitely one that I like to go back to now and again. It's a really kind of gritty, oppressive horror film. It's like Final Destination in a way that people just kind of die and it's caused by this devil child. In Final Destination, it's more of an invisible devil type entity. I've not seen all of the films in this series. I've seen one, two. I've not seen three, which is the one with Sam Neill in it. I don't know why. I'd definitely like to get around to seeing that before I do my yearly rankings for whatever year that came out in. I've seen the fourth one. That was on British TV a couple of times when I was growing up. Not a bad film at all for a fourth in a franchise. I've not seen the remake because I've heard that it's pretty bad, so it's never really been a priority. But in terms of the first Omen films, there's some really great kills. The one that always gets me is the where the priest is walking through the woods in this sort of early evening, and this pole comes off this church and just impales him. That's a great kill. There's another one where this guy gets his head chopped off by a kind of moving sheet of glass, which is great. And there's a maid who sort of hangs herself out the window of this mansion. There's some really great stuff in this film. It's just got a great atmosphere. The original Omen is absolutely awesome. But it has fallen into the unlucky spot in the rankings because coming third means that you are an awesome film, but you're not quite good enough for the grand final. So let's find out which films today finish in the two golden spots, as it were, starting with my second favourite film from 1976. I don't think we've had any war films in this series so far. I don't remember any anyway, but I do like the genre. My dad used to be in the army, so he really liked war films, and I used to piggyback on the films that he watched as a child, so I saw lots of great films to do with World War II. With Eagle Has Landed is one that has really grown on me over the years. I think the first time I watched it as a teenager, I just thought, oh yeah, that was okay. And then the next time after that, I enjoyed it a little bit more. And it's got to the point now where every time I watch it, I just think, oh yeah, it's a classic World War II film that I really like, really exciting stuff. It's a story about a group of Germans who disguise themselves as Polish paratroopers or something, I can't remember. And they go into this English village and they're getting ready to try and assassinate Winston Churchill because he's apparently going to be in a certain town on a certain date. But halfway through the film, the Germans get exposed by accident. So for the rest of the film, they've got to think on their feet. They've got to improvise. Michael Caine plays the lead German. And I'm really glad to be able to praise a film with Michael Caine today because in my 1975 rankings, I had one of his films, Bottom, The Man Who Would Be King. But this is a lot better. It's got Donald Sutherland in it as well, playing this funny Irishman. I'm not sure why he's in league with the Germans. He just is. Donald Pleasance is in there as well. It's just a really well scripted, well made film. It's a little bit far fetched at times, but it's just a good, solid story. And I don't feel guilty about getting behind the Germans in this film because it's just a film. It doesn't matter if I cheer on the Germans in this film. We all know how the real World War II ended. So I really like The Eagle Has Landed. It's such a classic movie. So as you've just seen, today's winner is Carrie. If you don't know, this is a story about a girl who is badly bullied at school and she's got this miserable home life because she's got this overly religious mother. But it just so happens she has a weird kind of telekinesis skill, which could be bad news for anybody who continues to wrong her. And I'm not going to say anything more about the story because if you've never seen Carrie, you should make an effort to discover it for yourself. Technically, it's a horror film, but it's more than that. It's also just this really well-written drama. It covers a lot of interesting themes like bad parenting, bullying, peer pressure, being too religious. There's such a great cast of characters in this. I mean, the girl who plays Carrie, Sissy Spacek, what an amazing performance. I also love the performance of the guy who plays her date at the prom. I think the character's name is Tommy. I'm not sure about the actor's name, but he's absolutely amazing. John Travolta's in this playing a funny little part as a bully. The girl who plays Linda in Halloween, she's in it playing a bully. Nancy Allen's in it playing a bully, and she is so different in this than she is in RoboCop, where she's playing a really nice girl. And then we've got this really cool teacher character who sticks up for Carrie and keeps looking out for. I really enjoy that part as well. Piper Laurie, who plays Carrie's mother, is just absolutely terrifying. I mean, this film just has seven or eight parts in it, which are just absolutely brilliantly played and brilliantly cast. And I just love the story. It's very nicely paced, good script. This was Stephen King's first ever novel that he wrote, and it was adapted into this film just a couple of years later. The novel's very different from the film. The film is just a straight narrative. The novel is more of a kind of back and forth affair. I read it for the first time about 5 years ago. It's just such an emotional story. You don't have to be a girl to sort of get into feeling empathy for Carrie and what she goes through. It's just such a powerful tale, I think. And it's a film like The Eagle Has Landed, which has really grown on me over time. The first time I saw it, I don't remember being blown away by it, but just every single time I watch it, there's just something new that impresses me. And so I'm quite happy to crown it my favourite film in 1976 and send it through to the grand final. How will it fare in the grand final? Does it have much of a chance? I don't know, because we only have a few films that have qualified so far. I guess we will see in time. So for now, there is one more question I need to ask myself today. I've only really got two today. One of them is for a film called Logan's Run, which I thought sounded a really interesting concept when I just happened to stumble across a synopsis for it the other day. And the other one is a film which I've heard about for a long time, actually. I've just never gotten around to watching it, and I never even got around to watching it for this ranking. It's called The Town Which Dreaded Sundown, or The Town That Dreaded Sundown. I think there's an original film and then a remake later down the line. I've not seen either of them, but I'd be curious to, I guess, though I'm not massively desperate to watch it. But let me know in the comments if you've seen either Logan's Run or The Town, I should say, that dreaded sundown. And if there are any other films which you think I missed today that I've not mentioned at all, then let me know about those either. I'd be curious to possibly check them out, who knows. But for now, we're done with 1976. Carrie goes through to the grand final. The Eagle Has Landed may also end up in the grand final if there are enough places. All the other films are eliminated, and I'll be back soon with the rankings for 1977. That should be a fun year. Some classic films came out that year. Until then, though, cheerio, bye-bye.